So let's think a little bit about from a citizen's perspective, right? Of like what's happening when you're in a community, right? That is maybe marked by disorder or something like that, right? So there are a lot of like powerful emotions that happen in our lives, where whether they have fear, whether it can be happiness or joy, ambition, or something like that. But one that can promote a huge response in people is this semblance of fear, right? Now, fear, depending on what that fear is grounded in, right, and depending on the person, right, it can lead to a lot of different things, right? So, if we're scared for something, right, some of us are going to move into a flight kind of thing, right, where we want to get away from a situation where we want to avoid confrontation, or we look for ways to shut down something because of this unknown that can happen, right? Or maybe it could, I guess, possibly lead to running away and seeking escape through maybe like substance abuse of some kind, right? Or something like that, right? Um, at the same time, right, there are very also, um, the like a fight response, right, where we can look to be more combative about a situation, right? We can also seek maybe to exert more control over a situation where we feel a need to be in charge and really have people think, act, behave a certain way because of this inane fear, right? Or we want to intervene into something because of this, right? And depending on what equipment we have or what we perceive our capability to do something with, right, is going to, one, determine our response, or look for ways that we try to get out of this, right, or solve a problem, right? Now, with respect to crime and disorder, right, or how does this relate to crime and disorder, right? So if I am a citizen and I have like my eyes that are peering out at something, right, or I see maybe a different person, right, and we're seeing like, I don't know, maybe they're drinking, right, so they have here little six pack, they're chugging away, right, or something like that, right, you know now in this one-on-one instance, maybe I want to intervene, maybe I don't. Depends on the context, right, the situations that are around, and what kind of situations are at stake or something like that, right? So for example, there may be someone in your apartment complex, and depending on your apartment complex, you may feel like, hey, I'm sorry, you guys are getting a little bit rowdy, can you tone it down a little bit, please, I'm trying to sleep. Versus the ones who or maybe you're in maybe not a great apartment complex, and you're worried about like what something can do, right, because there are other signs of disorder, right? So when we think about what complicates this issue is context, right? And what ends up happening, right, is that when you think about the context, right, you think about the quality of surroundings. So how kept up and maintained, are the areas around us, right? So, how does it look? Is it cleaned up? Is it not, right? Why does that matter, right? Well, if an area is more cleaned up, right, it suggests that people are more caring. There's something about neatness and tidiness within reason, not like if someone's like a super neat freak, perhaps, but this quality of surroundings are really going to make you feel like, okay, this is an area that seems to care about intervention, or maybe not, right? So, or, something is, maintained cleanly or kept up well, right? It seems like, okay, well, this kind of thing seems to be, if there is something disruptive, it seems out of place and is something that should be controlled, versus areas where they're maybe not maintained and disruptions may be perceived to be like a normal part, or something to be expected, maybe not necessarily desired, but like could be expected because of this, right? So the maintenance of an issue, also be the time of day, right? So if this is taking place in morning, afternoon, evening, night, something like that, right? The type of person, depending on how you feel about someone, right? So, maybe there are cues that you look at some people, some promote fears, maybe others do not, right? Again, that's highly individual based off past experiences. But, all those things can matter, right? The idea behind disorder policing, though, is that signs of disorder are going to yield, that's what this arrow is, more fear, right? And because of more fear, this leads to another problem. So we have more fear, and we have, as a result of maybe like not a willingness to engage, I think disorder suggests that people are more fearful, and so they become more avoidant of intervening in problems. And as a result, crime is supposed to increase, right? So the goal then is that this fear then, because of community fear, and because of the surroundings that vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, right, and build this, right, is that because of this fear, there is a lower form of perhaps informal social control. So neighbors aren't willing to intervene with neighbors, or strangers in the neighborhood, or something like this, right? So there is a lower risk of intervention, and as a result of that, right, there are more permissive behaviors. Not necessarily an attitude, right? It does not necessarily mean that you accept and condone a behavior, but this permissive attitude by non-engagement. Is ultimately going to lead to more crime, right? So that is essentially kind of like the problem that disorder policing identifies, right? Is that this underlying process underneath, right? That is going to lead to more problems down the road. So based off of this then, how does this relate to policing, right? So if we know this in place, recall back in our little chart here where we talk about fear and flight, there's this intervention aspect where we maybe want to get control of a situation, or maybe you want to combat, right? A citizen may not feel like that, right? So under disorder policing then, the police are seen as the tool to control disorder and control or reduce disorder, and ultimately reduce crime. So with that understood, we'll pick up and expand upon this in the next